Mr. Myers, the compression pants in your bag. We need to talk about what you're wearing under your uniform.
Those are mine.
This is Rohan Myers, a Caribbean Airlines flight attendant working a routine crew arrival at Fort Lauderdale. The secret he has been keeping beneath his uniform is about to catch up with him.
Compression gear for long flights. That is standard for crew on this route.
You came in on Caribbean Airlines Flight 39 for Montego Bay working crew. You've been sweating through the entire inspection.
By the end of this shift, he would be unemployed, in federal custody, and facing a charge that would cost him his career, his country, and access to the United States for the rest of his life. The investigation that ended his career did not take 16 months. It took 12 minutes inside a private inspection room at Fort Lauderdale-Hollywood International Airport. 4 black molded inserts, 6.5 pounds of cocaine, 1 pair of long-legged compression pants worn under a Caribbean Airlines uniform, and a confession that came before the officers even finished asking the question. Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. Would you risk a 40-year career, your home country, and your 2 kids for $10,000 cash? That is the math this man did. Drop your honest answer in the comments. And if you are not subscribed yet, hit that button right now. We cover cases the mainstream news lets disappear after one 20-second segment. Rohan Myers was born in 1975 in Kingston, Jamaica. The capital city sprawled along the southeastern coast of the island. His family lived in a working-class neighborhood where the houses were small, the yards were narrow, and the sound of small commercial planes coming in low over the harbor was a constant background to every childhood afternoon. His father worked in maintenance for a hotel chain on the north coast, spending weeks at a time in Montego Bay before returning home with a small envelope of cash and a bag of laundry. His mother worked at a market stall near Crossroads, selling produce and small dry goods 6 days a week, leaving the house before dawn and returning after dark. Rohan was the second of 4 children. He grew up sharing a bedroom with his older brother and one of his sisters, learning early how to share space, share food, and stretch a small amount of money across a large number of needs. Neighbors who remembered the family from those years described him as quiet, observant, and unusually polite for a boy his age. He held doors for older women on the street. He carried groceries for his mother without being asked. He learned to iron his own school uniform by the time he was 9 years old, because his mother was too tired by Sunday night to do it for him, and a wrinkled shirt at the Catholic primary school he attended meant a public reprimand on Monday morning. He finished primary school with average grades and was admitted to a secondary school in the Kingston area that drew students from a range of neighborhoods. He was not a star student. Teachers who remembered him described him as someone who never caused trouble and never stood out. He showed up. He turned in his work. He sat near the back of the classroom and watched. The one subject he showed real interest in was geography. He kept a small map of the Caribbean folded inside his exercise book, and he liked to trace the routes that the planes overhead were taking: Kingston to Miami, Montego Bay to New York, Port of Spain to Toronto. He had never been on an airplane in his life. He left secondary school at 17 with a handful of passes and no clear plan. For 2 years, he worked at a small grocery on Halfway Tree Road, stocking shelves and running a cash register for the equivalent of a few thousand Jamaican dollars a week. He took a second job on weekends, helping his uncle clean offices in the new Kingston business district, vacuuming carpets and emptying wastebaskets between 9 at night and 4 in the morning. He saved every dollar he did not need for food or transportation, and at 19, he enrolled in a customer service training program at a private vocational school that promised job placements in the hospitality and tourism industries. The program ran for 6 months. He learned how to greet a guest in 3 languages. He learned how to handle a complaint without escalating it. He learned how to stand for 8 hours without his back giving out. He learned how to smile through exhaustion. The instructor who certified him wrote on his final evaluation that he was poised, attentive, and unusually composed under pressure. Those words would follow him for the next 2 decades. They would be quoted, almost verbatim, in 3 separate employee reviews from 3 separate employers. His first hospitality job was at a resort in Ocho Rios on the north coast, working the front desk on the night shift. He worked there for almost 3 years, learning the rhythms of the tourist industry, the cruise ship arrivals, the spring break weeks, the slow months when the rooms sat half empty. He moved on to a larger hotel in Montego Bay, where he worked the concierge desk and started picking up small amounts of additional money by arranging tours, transportation, and excursions for guests. He was good at it. Guests requested him by name. He received commendation letters that he kept in a folder in his bedside drawer. In 2003, when he was 28 years old, a friend who worked for a regional airline told him that the carrier was hiring flight attendants out of Kingston and Montego Bay, and that the application window was open for another 2 weeks. Rohan filled out the application that same night. He listed his hospitality experience, his customer service certification, and the 3 commendation letters from the Montego Bay Hotel. He was invited to an in-person interview the following month. He bought a new white dress shirt for the occasion. He pressed it himself. He got the job. Caribbean Airlines, the state-owned flag carrier of Trinidad and Tobago, brought him through a 3-month training program in Port of Spain that covered emergency procedures, evacuation drills, in-flight medical response, food and beverage service, conflict de-escalation, and the federal aviation regulations that governed every route the airline flew. He passed every module. He was assigned to a base out of Montego Bay, working primarily on routes between Jamaica, the United States, Canada, and Trinidad. His starting salary, including per diem allowances, was the equivalent of approximately 40,000 United States dollars a year, more than 3 times what he had ever made in his life. He rented his own apartment for the first time. He bought a small used car. He sent money home to his mother every 2 weeks. Within 5 years, he had met the woman who would become the mother of his 2 children. They had a daughter in 2008 and a son in 2010. He posted photographs of them on the corkboard inside his locker at the Montego Bay Crew Lounge. His co-workers said he talked about his kids more than he talked about anything else. He kept a small laminated photo of the 2 of them clipped to the inside of his uniform jacket, a habit other crew members noticed and remembered. Fort Lauderdale-Hollywood International Airport sits on the southeastern edge of Broward County, Florida, 8 miles north of the Miami-Dade County line and just under 3 miles from the Atlantic Ocean. It is the 3rd busiest airport in the state of Florida. It processes more than 35 million passengers a year, and it is one of the highest volume international ports of entry on the east coast of the United States for traffic arriving from the Caribbean, Central America, and South America. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, known by its 3-letter initialism CBP, is the federal agency responsible for inspecting every person and every piece of cargo that enters the United States through that airport. At FLL, the CBP Arrivals Hall is located on the lower level of Terminal 4. International arrivals are funneled through a series of inspection booths, automated kiosks, and secondary screening rooms staffed 24 hours a day by federal officers. The agency's mission, in the language of its own internal manuals, is to detect and intercept any person, substance, or item that is not legally authorized to enter the country. The inspection process at FLL is layered. Passengers go through one set of procedures. Crew members, the pilots, flight attendants, and cabin staff who arrive on commercial aircraft as employees rather than as travelers, go through a separate, parallel process. Historically, the crew inspection process has been less intensive than the passenger process. This is not an accident or an oversight. It is a deliberate operational compromise. Crew members are screened and vetted by their airlines. They hold professional credentials. They wear identifiable uniforms. They are traveling on a recurring, scheduled basis. They are, in the language of the federal inspection protocols, a lower risk population than the general traveling public. That operational compromise, the lower intensity crew lane, has been the subject of internal review at CBP for more than a decade. Because what the drug trafficking networks of the Caribbean and Central America figured out at some point in the early 2000s, and what they have continued to exploit ever since, is that the operational profile of an airline employee is an enormously attractive cover for a courier role. A flight attendant in uniform walking through an international arrivals hall with a crew bag attracts almost no attention. A passenger in the same hall, sweating slightly, traveling alone, paying cash for a one-way ticket, attracts a great deal of attention. The differential is the entire point. The response from CBP has been to layer additional screening protocols on top of the routine crew inspection. Behavioral analysis training for the officers, randomized secondary screening, baggage examination, body scan technology, canine units. The compression pants concealment method, in particular, has been a documented technique on the Caribbean to Florida air routes for years. Per the Broward Palm Beach New Times reporting, Myers' arrest at FLL was the third in 3 months at that single airport involving an underwear concealment cocaine smuggling attempt. 3 cases in 90 days, at one airport, on one inspection lane. The system was watching. The man who recruited Rohan Myers was not a stranger to the operation. He was not, in the language of the federal indictment, a friend of a friend or a fellow passenger on an unrelated trip. He was a professional. He worked for, or on behalf of, a Caribbean-based cocaine trafficking network that moved product on the Montego Bay-to-Fort Lauderdale air route, and his job was to identify, recruit, and equip courier candidates from among the airline workforce that flew that route every week. The approach happened in Jamaica in the months before September 2015. The exact details of the recruitment were never fully entered into the federal court record. Myers' cooperation with investigators did not extend to a full identification of the recruiter, and the federal prosecutors did not bring a separate indictment based on Myers' account. What was entered into the record was the framework. A man Myers had met in Jamaica, a conversation that started with small talk and ended with an offer. 10,000 United States dollars, 1 trip, 1 delivery, a hotel in South Florida. The recruiter would handle the equipment. The recruiter would handle the packaging. The recruiter would meet him at the airport in Montego Bay on the day of the flight and personally help him tape the packages to his legs. Myers said yes. What that yes meant, in the structural terms of the operation, was that the trafficking network had successfully completed the first half of its operational cycle. It had identified an airline employee with regular access to the Fort Lauderdale arrivals hall. It had cultivated a financial relationship. It had secured an agreement. The second half of the cycle, the actual transit of the product, was scheduled for September 8, 2015, on Caribbean Airlines Flight 39, from Montego Bay to Fort Lauderdale. The equipment was simple. 2 pairs of long-legged athletic compression pants, the kind that runners, cyclists, and athletes wear under their normal clothing for muscle compression and warmth. The compression pants, made of high-stretch spandex, were designed to fit snugly against the legs. That snugness was the operational feature. Anything taped to the leg underneath the compression pants would be held flat, held still, and held invisible beneath the loose drape of a uniform trouser. The product was cocaine, 4 packages, approximately 1.5 kilograms each in total weight, approximately 6.5 pounds combined. The packages had been pressed into hard, dense, black-wrapped rectangles, the molded inserts that the CBP officers would later describe in their report as resembling small, flat bricks. Each one was wrapped in multiple layers of opaque tape, then in additional duct tape for adhesion and structural rigidity. On the morning of September 8, 2015, Myers arrived at the Sangster International Airport in Montego Bay for his shift on Flight 39. He met the recruiter in a private location near the airport. The federal record does not specify the exact location, but the account establishes that the equipment transfer happened in person, in Jamaica, before Myers cleared the Jamaican departure's security. The recruiter helped Myers prepare. The first pair of compression pants went on first. Then the 4 taped packages, 2 on the thighs, 2 on the lower calves and ankles, all 4 positioned to lie flat against the leg muscles and to be held in place by the elastic compression of the spandex. Then the uniform trousers over the top. The second pair of compression pants, the spare, went into Myers's luggage. The intended purpose of that spare pair was operationally specific. After the delivery in South Florida, Myers would have removed the loaded pair, transferred the packages to whoever was receiving them at the hotel, and then changed into the second clean pair before any return flight or any further travel. The spare pair was, in evidentiary terms, the corroborating physical artifact of the smuggling intent. It was not a personal use item. It was operational redundancy. Myers boarded Flight 39 in uniform. He worked the flight as part of the crew. He performed the safety demonstration. He served the in-flight beverages. He walked the aisle. He smiled at passengers. He helped a mother stow a diaper bag in the overhead bin. The flight from Montego Bay to Fort Lauderdale was approximately 1 hour and 40 minutes in the air. For the entire duration of that flight, the 4 taped packages were against his skin under the compression pants under the uniform trousers, and he was doing his job. He brought a coffee to the captain. He collected the empty cups. He prepared the cabin for landing. Flight 39 landed at Fort Lauderdale-Hollywood International Airport on the morning of September 8, 2015. The aircraft taxied to the assigned gate at Terminal 4. The passengers disembarked first. The crew followed, walking up the jet bridge in a small group, rolling their crew suitcases behind them, heading for the CBP crew inspection lane in the International Arrivals Hall. The crew lane at FLL on that morning was operating at a normal rhythm. Crew members from arriving international flights moved through the inspection in groups of 2 and 3. The CBP officers on duty processed identification, asked routine questions, examined crew bags. Most inspections lasted between 1 and 3 minutes. The crew member presented identification and a customs declaration form. The officer asked a small number of questions. The bag was opened and inspected, and the crew member was waved through. Myers's inspection started the same way. He presented his identification. He presented his declaration form. He answered the standard questions: purpose of trip, length of stay, items declared. The CBP officer began the routine examination of his crew bag. The behavioral indicators began almost immediately. Myers, per the official CBP and Homeland Security Investigations report, became very nervous. He began sweating profusely. The CBP officers on the lane were trained to recognize these indicators. Behavioral analysis is one of the foundational layers of secondary screening protocols at international ports of entry. A crew member who is sweating profusely in an air-conditioned arrivals hall, whose breathing rate has visibly elevated, whose hands have become unsteady, whose eye contact has shifted away from the officer. That crew member has, in the operational language of the inspection protocols, raised a flag. The officer continued the bag inspection. Inside the crew suitcase, among the folded shirts and toiletries and the small zippered bag of personal effects, the officer found a pair of long-legged athletic compression pants. Compression pants, on their own, are not contraband. Many flight crew members carry athletic clothing for layover workouts. But the combination, the behavioral indicators on a crew member who has just arrived from a known source country on a known trafficking route, and the presence of an unworn compression garment of the type associated with body concealment smuggling, was enough to escalate the inspection from routine to focused. The officer asked Myers about the compression pants. The question was open-ended. The question was deliberately non-accusatory. The question was, in the language of behavioral interviewing protocols, designed to give Myers an opportunity to provide a normal innocuous explanation for running, for layover workouts, for whatever, and to observe his response. Myers's response was the catalyst. He did not provide a normal innocuous explanation. He did not say he wore them to the gym. He did not say they were for a friend. He did not say anything that a person carrying compression pants for any legitimate reason would have said. He became more nervous. The sweating intensified. His composure, the composure that 3 separate employee evaluations across 2 decades had described in some variation of poised, attentive, and unusually composed under pressure, began to fail. The officers on the lane could see it failing, and they made the call that the inspection needed to move to a private room for a body search. The private inspection room at the FLL International Arrivals Hall is a small, windowless space with a single table, a chair, and a closed door. CBP officers conduct body searches in these rooms under specific protocols. A same-gender officer, at least one additional witness officer, a documented chain of custody for any items found, and a contemporaneous written report. Myers was escorted from the inspection lane into the private room. 2 officers accompanied him. The door was closed. The body search protocol was explained. Myers was asked to stand and to be prepared for the search. What happened next was the part of the case that the federal prosecutors would later cite as the basis for the cooperation credit at sentencing. Because Myers did not require the officers to conduct the search. He did not require them to discover the packages through physical examination. He did not require any further investigative effort. He confessed. Per the official report filed by U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and Homeland Security Investigations, Myers told the officers, in his own words, in plain English, before any pat-down had been conducted. "I have cocaine on me. I'm supposed to take it to the hotel." Then he removed the compression pants from beneath his uniform trousers himself. The officers documented what they observed. 4 black molded inserts, duct-taped to Myers's thighs and ankles, held in place by the long-legged compression underwear. The inserts were photographed in place against his legs before they were removed. They were photographed again after removal, on the table in the inspection room. They were field tested. The field test was positive for cocaine. The packages were weighed. The total weight came in at just over 6.5 pounds, approximately 2.95 kilograms. We are about to get into the trial and the sentencing on this one. Before we do, if you appreciate this kind of detailed coverage of federal customs cases, the kind that does not get a follow-up in the local paper after the arrest headline, subscribe and hit the bell. We do this every single week. And tell me in the comments what you would have done in that inspection room. Would you have lied? Would you have stayed quiet? Or would you have done what he did? The officers asked Myers for his account. He gave it. He told them it was his first attempt at smuggling. He told them that a man he had met in Jamaica had recruited him for the trip. He told them about the $10,000 payment offer. He told them about the meeting with the recruiter at the airport in Montego Bay, and about the recruiter personally helping him tape the 4 packages to his legs before the flight. He told them about the hotel in South Florida and the intended delivery. He told them about the second pair of compression pants in his luggage, the spare. He did not invoke his right to counsel at that stage. He did not refuse to answer questions. He did not attempt to construct an exculpatory account. He cooperated, fully, immediately, on the record. The physical evidence was inventoried and sealed under federal chain of custody procedures. The 4 packages of cocaine, the 2 pairs of compression pants, the duct tape residue on Myers's legs, the photographs of the inserts in place, the photographs of the inserts on the table, the field test results, the crew suitcase, the uniform trousers, the customs declaration form, the crew identification, all of it became part of the federal case file. The case was assigned to the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida. A criminal complaint was filed. Myers was transferred from CBP custody to the federal detention facility. His flight attendant career, in the practical operational sense, ended in that inspection room. The Caribbean Airlines uniform he had been wearing for 12 years was logged into the evidence inventory as part of the chain of custody record. He would never put it on again. The confrontation in this case was not a single dramatic moment. It was the entire inspection sequence, the bag search, the question about the compression pants, the move to the private room, the confession, the removal of the packages. It happened in a windowless beige room with 2 federal officers. No audience, no cameras except the body-worn devices that the officers were carrying, and a man in a Caribbean Airlines uniform who, when the question was finally asked, did not even try to lie. The transcript of the inspection room exchange, as reconstructed from the CBP report and the ICE HSI documentation, is brief. Officer: Do you have anything on your person you want to tell us about? Myers: I have cocaine on me. I'm supposed to take it to the hotel. Officer. Where is it? Myers. On my legs, under the compression pants. Officer. How much? Myers. 4 packages. I don't know the exact weight. Officer. Who gave it to you? Myers. A man in Jamaica. I met him a few months ago. Officer. Who were you supposed to deliver it to? Myers. A hotel in South Florida. I don't have the name yet. I was supposed to get a phone call. Officer. How much were you being paid? Myers. $10,000. Officer. Is this your first time doing this? Myers. Yes. First time. I have never done this before. The officers documented the exchange. They documented his demeanor, the visible sweating, the reddened eyes, the hands that trembled when he removed the compression pants and laid the 4 taped packages on the table. They documented the time of the confession. They documented the time of the seizure. They documented every step. Myers asked one question near the end of the exchange. He asked the officers what was going to happen to his children. The officers told him that was a matter for his attorney. They did not answer the question. The federal criminal complaint against Rohan Myers was filed in the U.S. District Court for the Southern District of Florida. The charge was importation of cocaine, a violation of Title 21, United States Code, Section 952. The statutory maximum exposure under the specific subsection charged was 3 years in federal prison. Myers was assigned a defense attorney. He retained David Oscar Marcus, a Miami-based criminal defense lawyer with extensive experience in federal cases in the Southern District. Marcus reviewed the case file. He reviewed the inspection report. He reviewed the chain of custody. He reviewed the confession. He reviewed the cooperation. And he advised his client that, given the immediate confession, the cooperation with investigators, the absence of any prior criminal record, the first-time mule profile, and the relatively contained scale of the offense at the federal level, the most favorable path forward was a guilty plea with a full acceptance of responsibility allocation and a mitigation-focused sentencing presentation. Myers entered a guilty plea in October 2015, 1 month after his arrest. The plea was accepted by the court. The case was set for sentencing. The pre-sentence investigation report, the document prepared by the United States Probation Office that the judge reviews before imposing a sentence, laid out the framework. Quantity of cocaine, 6.5 pounds. Federal sentencing guidelines range for the documented quantity, with credit for acceptance of responsibility and the absence of prior criminal history, a window in the low to mid-range of the available sentence spectrum. Aggravating factors, international importation, use of professional position to facilitate the offense. Mitigating factors, immediate confession, full cooperation with investigators, first offense, family responsibilities, the recruiter-courier dynamic rather than a principal trafficker role. The sentencing hearing took place on January 6, 2016. The presiding judge was U.S. District Judge William Dimitrouleas, a senior federal judge in the Southern District of Florida, with more than 2 decades on the federal bench. The hearing was held in the federal courthouse in Fort Lauderdale. The government presented its sentencing position. The defense presented its mitigation case. Marcus argued the first-time mule profile, the immediate confession, the cooperation, the family responsibilities. Myers' 2 young children in Jamaica, the financial pressure that had made the $10,000 offer attractive enough to override 2 decades of clean professional conduct, the deportation consequence that would automatically follow any federal sentence and would foreclose any future legal entry to the United States. Myers spoke at the allocution. He stood at the defense table in his tan detention uniform, and he addressed the court directly. He apologized. He cried. Per the Sun-Sentinel reporting from the courtroom, he said, "I accept responsibility for my actions, and I have had 4 months of being incarcerated to really extensively review the seriousness of my actions." He did not blame the recruiter. He did not blame the financial pressure. He did not blame the operational profile of the airline employee role that had made him an attractive target for the trafficking network. He accepted responsibility for his actions in his own words, in the federal courtroom, in front of the judge who would decide his sentence. Judge Dimitrouleas imposed the sentence: 30 months in federal prison, 2 years and 6 months, at the low end of the applicable guidelines range. 3 years of supervised release to follow. Deportation to Jamaica upon completion of the sentence by operation of federal immigration law. The sentence was, in the structural reading of the federal sentencing record, a credit the cooperation outcome, a sentence calibrated to reflect the immediate confession, the full cooperation with investigators, and the first-time mule profile, while still imposing a meaningful federal incarceration term for the importation of nearly 3 kilograms of cocaine. Myers served his federal sentence in a Bureau of Prisons facility. Upon completion of the sentence, he was processed into the custody of U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement and removed from the United States to Jamaica. His authorization to work in the U.S. aviation industry was terminated by operation of the federal conviction. His career as a flight attendant, the career that had begun with a freshly pressed white shirt and a borrowed navy tie in a Kingston living room in 2003, that had paid for his apartment and his car and the small monthly transfers to his mother, that had given him 2 children and 12 years of clean professional service on the Caribbean to North America air routes, was over. The operational lesson of the Myers case has been absorbed into the institutional record at U.S. Customs and Border Protection. The crew inspection protocols at Fort Lauderdale-Hollywood International Airport and at the other high-volume Caribbean to Florida ports of entry have been adjusted in response to the documented pattern of compression pants concealment cases. The behavioral analysis training has been expanded. The randomized secondary screening rate on crew lanes has been increased. The canine deployment schedule on international crew arrivals has been adjusted. 3 cases in 3 months, in 2015, at 1 airport. The pattern was real. The pattern was being watched, and the trafficking networks that had built their courier pipelines around the operational profile of the airline employee, the uniform, the professional appearance, the standard route, the lower intensity custom scrutiny, were running their pipelines into a system that had been redesigned, quietly, to detect exactly the technique they were using. Rohan Myers walked into that redesigned system on the morning of September 8, 2015, wearing a Caribbean Airlines uniform, carrying a crew suitcase with a spare pair of compression pants inside, and with 4 taped packages of cocaine against the skin of his thighs and ankles. 12 minutes after he reached the inspection booth, he had confessed. 4 months later, he was sentenced. 3 years after that, his career, his country, and his access to the United States were gone. For $10,000, he never collected. This case was hard to watch, but the case on your screen right now is, in some ways, worse, because the person at the center of it had every reason to know better and chose otherwise anyway. Click it now.